welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a fascinating YouTube video all about Saturn and Vedic astrology. We've got an expert in astrology here to help us unpack all this, but even before we get started, just the concept of Saturn as this cosmic teacher, kind of strict.
Yeah.
Like it really got my attention. Like, where in my life am I being tested?
Yeah, that's a great instinct you have there. Vedic astrology uses this idea of houses in your birth chart, and it's like almost a map of the sky when you were born. And each of these houses represents like a different area of life. So, you have finances, relationships, career, all these different things. And so where Saturn is placed in a specific house can really show you where those lessons might be most intense.
So it's not just that Saturn's making things difficult, kind of, across the board. It's more like it's targeted then.
Exactly. So for example, Saturn in the second house. That's all about finances and material possessions and things like that. So it might indicate that you're going to face financial challenges potentially, but also have the potential for great wealth through hard work and discipline. So it's like Saturn saying, hey, you're going to have to really work for it, but the rewards will be worth it.
Okay, so Saturn in the second house, it's like time to buckle down and learn some serious budgeting skills. But what if Saturn's in a different house? Does that mean money's no object?
Not necessarily, because remember, Saturn's influence goes beyond just the house that it occupies. It casts these special aspects on other houses. It's kind of like throwing a spotlight, if you will. So for example, you might have Saturn in your fourth house, which represents like home and family, but it could be casting an aspect on your 10th house of career. So suggesting that your career success maybe could come through family connections or a family business, but also through a lot of hard work and dedication, those Saturnian themes.
Whoa, that's so interesting. So even if Saturn's not like directly in the money house, it can still be impacting your finances through those aspects. It's like a chain reaction kind of thing.
Precisely. And this is where Vedic astrology gets really fascinating, because it's not just about interpreting like individual placements in isolation. It's about understanding how all these pieces kind of fit together to create this unique picture of your life's journey.
In the video, there's this quote. It says, Saturn is the pain of the cosmic being. And that's intense, pretty intense way to describe a planet. But then it also talks about Saturn as this delayer, not a denier. How do those two ideas connect?
That's a great question. It's easy to see Saturn as this like harsh, punishing force, right? But Vedic astrology actually sees it more as a teacher, that pushes us to grow, even if it's uncomfortable. So that pain that the quote mentions, that's the growing pain of evolving, shedding old patterns, and becoming more aligned with our true selves.
So it's like that feeling of being stretched beyond your comfort zone, but in a way that ultimately makes you stronger.
Yes, exactly. And the idea of Saturn as a delayer, not a denier, really highlights that. It's not that Saturn's trying to keep good things from us. It's that it's like testing our commitment, our patience, making sure we've learned the lessons before we receive the rewards.
This is making me think about areas of my life where I've been hitting a wall. Maybe that's Saturn's influence, pushing me to try to figure things out a different way.
It's definitely possible. That's one of the most empowering things about Vedic astrology, I think. It gives you this framework for understanding those challenges, not as punishments, but as really opportunities for growth and transformation. So what areas of your life are you thinking about?
Well, I've been working on this creative project for ages, and it feels like it's just not moving forward. I'm like, is this even worth it anymore? So could that be Saturn's influence?
It could be. Saturn's all about hard work and discipline, and sometimes that means going through periods of frustration and delay before you see the results.
So how can I tell if it's just like me being impatient, or if it's actually Saturn's lesson in perseverance?
That's where understanding your birth chart comes in. So, for example, if you have Saturn in the fifth house, which is associated with creativity and self-expression, then those delays and challenges that you're experiencing with your creative project, it might be Saturn's way of pushing you to like develop greater discipline and resilience in that area.
Okay, so it's not a sign to give up. It's more a sign to kind of dig deeper and figure out how to work with Saturn's energy. It's clicking.
That's fantastic. And remember, Vedic astrology offers all sorts of techniques and remedies to help you work with Saturn's energy and not against it. So it's not about being at the mercy of the planets. It's about like understanding their influence so that you can make more conscious choices.
This is already blowing my mind.
Yeah.
But before we go too far down that road, I want to come back to something we touched on earlier. The video mentions that Saturn can bring both, like immense wealth, A&D financial difficulties. How can it be both? That seems kind of contradictory.
It's not as contradictory as it sounds. Remember, Saturn represents discipline, hard work, and long-term rewards. So if you're willing to, put in the effort and make responsible choices, Saturn can definitely bring great financial success. But if you're trying to cut corners, avoid responsibility, or, indulge in excessive spending, that's when Saturn's influence can manifest as financial hardship.
So it's not about luck, it's about aligning your actions with Saturn's principles. It's if you want Saturn to be your financial advisor, you better be ready to follow his strict budgeting plan.
That's a great way to put it, and it really emphasizes the importance of understanding Saturn's energy and working with it consciously.
This is so fascinating. But before we get too deep into those practical strategies, I want to take a moment to connect this back to our listeners. We're talking about Saturn's influence, but it's different for everyone depending on their individual birth chart, right?
Absolutely. And this is where things get really personalized. While we can talk about general principles, the real magic happens when you apply this knowledge to your own life, your own unique astrological blueprint.
So for our listeners who are thinking right now, okay, this is cool, but what about my Saturn? What would you suggest?
I'd say the first step is to get a basic understanding of your birth chart. You can find free chart calculators online, or you could even consult with, a professional astrologer if you want. Look at where Saturn is placed in your chart and what aspects it makes to other planets and houses. And that will really give you a starting point for understanding how Saturn's energy is, playing out in your life.
And then armed with that knowledge, they can start diving deeper into those specific placements and aspects and learning how to work with Saturn's energy in a way that actually supports, their growth and goals.
Exactly. It's like having a personalized roadmap for navigating Saturn's lessons and unlocking its potential for success and fulfillment.
This is such an empowering message. It's not about being a victim of fate. It's about understanding these cosmic forces that are at play and learning how to dance with them.
I couldn't agree more. And that's the beauty of Vedic astrology. It's not just about predicting the future. It's about understanding your own potential and taking charge of your life's journey.
This is such a great foundation for understanding Saturn and Vedic astrology. We've covered a lot of ground, from Saturn as this karmic teacher to the importance of houses and aspects to the idea that Saturn can bring both challenges and immense rewards. But this is just the beginning of our deep dive. We'll be back in the next part with more insights into how to actually work with Saturn's energy, including some specific tips and remedies from Vedic astrology.
I'm looking forward to it. There's so much more to explore.
So stay tuned, listeners. We're just getting started. Okay, so we've established that Saturn's this demanding mentor who pushes us to grow, but also have our best interests at heart. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole idea of Saturn being a karmic planet. What does that even mean? How does that play out in our lives?
Yeah, that's a question that goes really deep into the heart of Vedic astrology. Karma, in this context, it isn't about punishment or reward, but it's more about cause and effect. So the idea is that our past actions, they create certain tendencies within us, patterns that we kind of carry with us into this life. And Saturn's role is to illuminate those patterns, bring them to the surface so we can become aware of them and work with them consciously.
So it's not about being doomed by our past mistakes. It's about understanding how those experiences have shaped us and using that knowledge to make better choices in the present.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about taking responsibility for our own evolution, right?
Yeah.
And Saturn as that karmic teacher really helps us to see those patterns clearly, even if it's a little uncomfortable sometimes.
The video mentions a specific example that I found really interesting. It was about Saturn in the 9th house. It says, this placement can be one of the best positions for Saturn, even though it might involve delays or obstacles in areas like travel or education or even our belief systems. Why would that be seen as a positive placement?
That's a great example, and it highlights how Saturn's, challenges can actually lead to really profound growth. So the 9th house in Vedic astrology represents our pursuit of higher knowledge, our connection to something bigger than ourselves, our sense of purpose or dharma. So when Saturn's there, it's having, a strict but ultimately supportive guide who's kind of pushing you to really examine your beliefs, question your assumptions, and, seek deeper meaning in life.
It's like Saturn saying, okay, so you want to explore the world, expand your horizons, discover your purpose, great, but you're going to have to work for it, dig deep, and be willing to challenge your own comfort zones.
Precisely. And those like delays or obstacles that the video mentions, they're not meant to punish you. They're more about like refining your understanding, making sure you're approaching those pursuits with the right attitude, with integrity and like a genuine desire for growth.
So maybe that dream trip you've been planning gets postponed, but that delay like forces you to save more money, learn the language, research the culture, and ultimately like have a much richer experience when you finally get there.
Exactly. It's all about trusting that Saturn's, timing is always perfect, even if it doesn't seem that way in the moment. And the rewards that like come from working with Saturn's energy in this area of life can be like incredibly fulfilling.
I'm starting to see like a pattern here. It seems like with Saturn, the areas where we experience the most like challenges are often the areas where we have the most potential for like growth and reward. It's almost like those weightlifting exercises that make your muscles scream, but they ultimately make you stronger, right?
That's a great analogy. And it speaks to the transformative power of Saturn. It's not about avoiding challenges. It's about learning how to like use them to our advantage.
Okay, so let's say someone, they have Saturn in the 9th house and they're feeling those Saturnian delays or obstacles in their, pursuit of higher learning or travel. What are some practical things they can do to like work with Saturn's energy and turn those challenges into opportunities?
This is where the idea of remedies in Vedic astrology comes in. And remedies, it's not about like fixing Saturn or trying to like escape its influence. It's more about strengthening our connection to Saturn's positive energy and kind of lessening its harsher aspects.
So it's like finding ways to appease that like strict teacher. Not by, cheating or taking shortcuts, but by showing them you're serious about, like, learning the material.
Exactly, yeah. And there are many different remedies suggested in Vedic astrology, depending on, the specific placement and aspects of Saturn in your chart. But some, like common ones, include things like chanting mantras, performing acts of service, donating to charity, or even, wearing certain gemstones.
Like a whole toolkit for working with Saturn's energy. But I bet choosing the right remedies can get pretty complex, right? Would you recommend consulting with an astrologer for that?
Absolutely. Yeah. A qualified Vedic astrologer can really help you to like understand your birth chart, identify those specific areas where you're experiencing Saturn's influence, and recommend, personalized remedies to help you navigate those challenges effectively.
Sounds like a pretty empowering approach. Instead of feeling like you're at the mercy of the planets, you're taking an active role in like understanding and working with those energies.
Exactly. And that's, one of the things I find so inspiring about Vedic astrology. It's not about fatalism. It's about like empowerment.
Yeah. Earlier, we talked about how Saturn in the 2nd house can indicate both financial challenges and also like the potential for great wealth.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about how Saturn in the 9th house can like bring delays or obstacles in things like travel or education, but ultimately lead to like profound growth and fulfillment. I'm noticing a theme here. It's like with Saturn, it's never just one thing or the other. It's always this like dynamic interplay of, challenge and opportunity.
That's such a brilliant observation. It really speaks to the like complexity of Saturn's energy, right? It's not just like a simple, straightforward influence. It's, a multifaceted force that requires us to like engage with it on multiple levels.
And that engagement, it seems like, is less about trying to control Saturn or avoid its influence and more about like understanding its lessons, working with its kind of rhythms, and ultimately, using its energy to fuel our own growth and evolution.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful way to put it. It really captures the essence of, working with Saturn in Vedic astrology.
We've been diving really deep into these specific examples of Saturn in different houses, but I want to take a step back for a minute and think about the bigger picture. If someone is listening to this right now and they're thinking, okay, this is all very interesting, but how do I even begin to understand Saturn's influence in my life? What would you say to them?
I'd say the first step is to cultivate a sense of curiosity and self-awareness. Start paying attention to the areas of your life where you're experiencing challenges, delays, or limitations, and just kind of ask yourself, what is this teaching me? What patterns are showing up here? Where am I being asked to step up, to take responsibility, to develop greater discipline or resilience?
So it's like becoming your own detective, looking for those Saturnian clues in your everyday life.
Exactly. And the more you pay attention, the more you'll start to see those patterns emerge. And then once you kind of have a sense of where those challenges are showing up, then you can start exploring specific astrological techniques and remedies to help you, work with those energies more effectively.
This is so empowering. It's like instead of feeling like a victim of fate, You're like taking charge of your own destiny by understanding and working with these cosmic forces that are shaping your life.
I couldn't agree more. And that's the beauty of Vedic astrology. It's not just about like predicting the future. It's about understanding your own potential and, taking charge of your life's journey.
We've covered so much in this part of our deep dive. We explored the concept of Saturn as like this karmic planet. We went deep into the significance of Saturn in the 9th house and talked about the role of remedies in, working with Saturn's energy. But there's still so much more to uncover. In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some specific tips and techniques from Vedic astrology that you can actually use to harness Saturn's power and navigate its challenges with grace and wisdom.
Can't wait.
Me too. So stay tuned, listeners, for the final part of our deep dive into this fascinating world of Saturn in Vedic astrology. Okay, so we've learned a lot about Saturn as this cosmic teacher, the importance of houses and aspects, and even how to kind of look at those Saturnian delays as opportunities. Now for the grand finale. Let's talk about the actual practical tools and techniques from Vedic astrology that can help us actually work with Saturn's energy instead of feeling like we're constantly battling it.
Yeah, this is where it gets really fun. Vedic astrology, it offers so much wisdom for navigating these planetary influences, and, Saturn's no exception.
So no more feeling like we're stuck in detention with no way out. Give us the cheat sheet for acing Saturn's class.
Well, there's no cheating when it comes to karma, but there are definitely strategies for making the most of Saturn's lessons, and one of the most, I think, powerful tools is simply awareness. The more you understand Saturn's influence in your own birth chart, the better equipped you are to kind of work with it consciously.
So that means identifying those areas of life where Saturn's influence is strongest. So those houses where Saturn is actually residing or casting its aspects.
Yeah.
And then understanding the specific themes and challenges associated with those placements.
Exactly. So for example, if you have Saturn in the 10th house is the house of career, public image, things like that. So you might face delays in achieving career success, or maybe have to work harder than others to gain recognition. But by understanding this influence, you can approach your career with more patience, more discipline, a willingness to kind of put in the effort. And that can ultimately lead to much greater rewards in the long run.
So it's instead of getting frustrated when things don't happen overnight, you're using that knowledge of Saturn's influence to develop a more strategic long-term approach.
Yeah, exactly. And this applies to other areas of life as well. So, Saturn in the 7th house, which is the house of relationships, it might indicate, challenges in finding a partner or maintaining harmony in relationships. But understanding this influence can help you to approach relationships with more realism, with patience and a willingness to kind of work through those difficulties. And that can ultimately lead to much stronger, more enduring bonds.
So it's not about trying to escape Saturn's influence, but more about using that awareness to make more conscious choices and kind of cultivate those Saturnian qualities of patience, discipline, and perseverance.
Exactly. And that's where those specific remedies that we touched on earlier, they come into play. So Vedic astrology actually offers a variety of techniques for strengthening our connection to Saturn's kind of positive energy and mitigating its harsher aspects.
Okay, spill the beans. What are some of those remedies? I'm ready to load up my Saturn survival kit.
One of the most powerful and accessible remedies is the practice of mantra. So chanting specific mantras associated with Saturn, like the Om Sham Shani Sharaya Nama mantra, this can really help to appease Saturn's energy, invoke its blessings, and just kind of cultivate a sense of inner peace and strength.
So it's setting the intention to actually work with Saturn's energy in a more positive way.
Exactly. And the repetition of the mantra, it creates this vibrational frequency that can help to shift our own energy and align us with Saturn's higher vibrations.
Okay, I'm adding mantra chanting to my list. What else?
Another powerful remedy is selfless service. So Saturn represents the principle of karma, action and consequence. So by engaging in, acts of service, we're essentially balancing our karmic scales and generating positive karma, which can help to kind of mitigate the negative effects of Saturn.
So it's saying to the universe, hey, I'm willing to put in the work to contribute to something bigger than myself, which aligns with those Saturnian principles of hard work and responsibility.
Exactly. And those acts of service, they don't have to be like grand gestures, you know. It could be as simple as like helping a neighbor, volunteering at, a local charity, or even just offering a listening ear to, a friend who's in need.
This is making me think about how Saturn's influence, even though it can bring challenges, it can also be this incredible force for good, right? It's almost pushing us to become more compassionate, more responsible, more engaged in, making the world a better place.
That's a beautiful insight. It really speaks to the transformative potential of Saturn's energy. It's not just about personal growth. It's about using those lessons to contribute to something, larger than ourselves.
Okay, so we've got mantra chanting, selfless service. Any other Saturn soothing strategies we should know about?
Another powerful remedy involves working with gemstones. So, certain gemstones like blue sapphire and amethyst are associated with Saturn and can actually be worn to kind of enhance Saturn's positive influence and mitigate its negative effects. However, it's super important to consult with a qualified astrologer before wearing any gemstones because the specific gem and its placement on the body can vary depending on, your individual birth chart.
So, impulse buying at the crystal shop.
Yeah.
Always best to get some expert advice when you're working with gemstones.
Absolutely. And that advice really goes for all of these remedies. Vedic astrology is a very complex and nuanced system. And it's always best to work with a, knowledgeable guide who can help you understand the specific energies that are at play in your own, unique life.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. We've gone from feeling like Saturn was this looming ominous force to seeing it as this powerful teacher who, while strict, ultimately wants us to, succeed and reach our full potential.
It's been such a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
And with you. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has empowered you to approach Saturn's influence with more understanding and courage, and even maybe a sense of excitement. Remember, Saturn's not something to be feared. It's a force to be embraced, a cosmic mentor guiding us toward growth, mastery, and ultimately the fulfillment of our soul's purpose. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the universe.